Hello there. My name is Casey Hudson with Crazy Casey's Customs, a little shop located up in the hills outside of Dayton, Nevada. This car behind me is a 1968 Ford Mustang Fastback. Belongs to a good buddy of mine, actor Louis Herthum. If you own a television set, you're probably familiar with Louis Herthum's work. He starred in everything from Murder, She Wrote to Westworld, and a couple of my personal favorites, cameo appearances in shows like Justified and True Detectives. What a lot of people don't know about Lou is he is a huge fan of Bullitt, the Steve McQueen movie with the infamous car chase with a 1968 Ford Mustang Fastback and a black 68 Charger.
It was really the Bullitt chase scene that inspired me to go in show business, because my dad took me to see that film, and I walked out of the film and I said, it's what I want to do when I grow up. And
Lou reached out to me years ago, back when I still lived in California, long before I had ambitions of opening a shop. He had seen my own car on Instagram, I believe. And asked me if I could build him something similar, taking his car and making it better. He had a guy do some work on this thing. He wasn't happy with the way the car performed. Little did he know that guy really did a number on this thing. And little did I know, because boy, when I got this thing, I was shocked. I was shocked that work could be done so poorly. And I got under the car, I took a ton of photos, I sent them to Lou, and I said, Lou, you need to buy another car, brother. This thing is bad. Not that it couldn't be saved. It was a little bit daunting for me with my tools to try to save it, because there was a lot wrong. But I just knew he would be money ahead if we went and found him a donor vehicle and started from scratch. And Lou, being the kind of guy he is, he said, you know what? I'm not going to be able to sell this thing with a clear conscience, knowing what you've told me about the shape that it's in. And I saw where he's coming from. So about that time, I put my thinking cap on and I said, well, how do you take a car where the structure's been compromised, poor work's been done, and you make it good again? Well, you put a full chassis under it. And I had seen Roadster Shop's Test Mule 68 Mustang on their website. It's kind of a tribute to the Bullitt car in and of itself. And I said, that might be just the thing for this car. And that's where we went. We went with the Roadster Shop Spec chassis. We're going to keep it old school, so we went with small disc brakes. I'm going to get into all those details later in the build. But in this video, I want to kind of show you how this car came in and outline the work that I've done to get it to the point where it is. And then show you the chassis and getting the chassis underneath the car. And if you have a car with a Mustang 2 suspension on it, which, man, I hate those things. I think that whoever came up with that idea has just done a disservice to the classic Mustang community. But if you happen to have a car with a Mustang 2, and a lot of them are installed by people who probably shouldn't be installing Mustang 2s, if it's botched like this will kind of serve as a good guide of how to take a Mustang 2 car and make it into something really nice with the Roadster Shop Spec chassis. Okay, here are some before and after photos of this car when it showed up. As you can see here, somebody replaced the floor and did a terrible job fitting it to the cross member. Here's my repair. The floor was actually just kind of scabbed in on top of the original floor. They cut out some of the rest, but left some behind. So I went and fully cut it out and seam welded everything. So you can see here, the repairs were just spot welded in. There was no seam sealer anywhere. So it would have leaked and it would have rusted out again. This is my repair. Again, no seam sealer. This is the seam at the rocker panel. It was welded on top of rust, no seam sealer. Water would have just gotten in. This is my repair. The toe board was cut out, just hacked out, tack welded back in place, no seam sealer. My repair again, I replaced the toe board because underneath you expect to see the toe board. Here's an egregious fit up of the tunnel stiffening cross member and repaired with the new floor. And here's the booger welds where they attach the subframe, where the car gets all of its structure to the floor. And here it is properly rosette welded with seam sealer. This one is weird. Fiberglass floor repair. The sub rail and the floor were attached with fiberglass, and here that is repaired. And here was one where they seamed in a section of floor, didn't prime it or seam seal it at all, and it just rusted right back out. So here it is, again, repaired. Okay, and here we're going to go into some photos of the Mustang 2 and the way that it was installed. I've circled some of the egregious fabrication on this thing, but basically it was just a combination of missing welds or very, very poorly performed welds and the worst hacked up motor mounts I think I've ever seen in my professional career. This thing was rusty and paint just over rust. It was a mess. All right, so removing a Mustang 2 suspension from one of these classic Mustangs is not as simple as cutting out the cross member. Let me show you what's going on. All right, so the Mustang 2 cross member and spring hats are cut out of this thing, but that leaves these chassis reinforcing rails, and that's not all. They actually cut out a spring relief out of the original frame rail and then box it back in. So what I've got to do is I've got to go in, I've got to cut along these welds. All the way along this whole thing, top, bottom, side and side. You can see I've started to do that here. In fact, I've cut out that piece. You got to cut down without cutting through the factory frame rail. Done that little bit up there too. Started to score this side. It's a lot of work. It makes a ton of debris on the ground. I'll give you an idea of what this side is like. Here's the outside on this one. As you can see, got a big old cutout for the spring that was then boxed in. And they take this whole seam along with it too. So I've got to weld this seam back up and reconnect it there. A lot of extra work. All right, so with 30 minutes or so of grinding, this is where we are on this one piece. I tell you, this is a tedious process. And these welds are left over. And where the welds meet the factory frame rail still, that's gonna be a trouble spot. So my plan is to come in and grind this whole weld seam down all the way across there, and then do the same thing here at the top. And then I'm gonna go to the inside and work on the rest of the bracket, and then I'll finish grind all the rest of this stuff after that. All right, so reinforcement plate cut off, welds sort of rough ground. I still have this giant hole in the frame to patch, and I still have a lot of metal finishing to do. Ton of dust on the floor. This is a hard job. That was a solid 3 hours of grinding. Let me get it metal finished and I'll bring the camera back to show you what that looks like. All right, so we are all metal finished on the inside of the frame rail. The reinforcements are cut off. The little areas where I went through a little bit with the grinder are welded back up and ground smooth. We've welded in the little half circle patches for our old spring pockets top and bottom. And basically we're back to a stock frame rail. On the back side, we still have the big cutout where our spring pocket was. But we've got a nice little piece of metal to weld in there, and that'll get welded on the seam, top and bottom, and all that will get ground flush. That is all necessary to fit the Roadster Shop chassis. Still have a little bit of grinding to do over here. Still have a little teeny bit more to do over there, but we're almost back to a full frame rail. Now, that's not to say that I would do it this way if I weren't installing a full chassis from Roadster Shop underneath this car. If I was gonna put the shock towers back in this thing, I'd want to replace the whole frame rail. By cutting to install the Mustang 2, even with that reinforcement, you've significantly weakened the main structure of the frame. So if this car weren't getting a full chassis, I would not recommend this repair. All right, and there the frame section is welded back in and ground smooth. So basically, we're back to having a full four-sided frame at this point, and ready for the chassis to bolt on this side. Now I gotta do it all over again. Okay, so now we have both sides of the Mustang 2 cut out of this car. Working on a little bit more frame rail rust repair over there. In addition to cutting out the Mustang 2, I had to take out the sway bar mounts, the e-brake brackets on the side of the front frame rails. You got to drill out the spot welds and remove the rear e-brake brackets. And then you got to grind those welds smooth. You got to get rid of this guy. And then you got to remove both of the tow hook brackets off the rear frame rails. And I'm going to have a little bit of cleanup to do there. Okay, so after you get all of your chassis prep done, it's time to test fit the Roadster Shop Spec chassis. Expect to do a little bit of trimming, a little bit of hammering, but I was surprised. As bad as this car was, the chassis actually went on just fine. You fully install it, you got to drill a couple of mounting holes in the proper locations once it's installed, and then it all comes back apart again for finalization of any kind of paint or bodywork you want to do on the undercarriage, engine bay, so on and so forth. Okay. And here the body tub is finished and ready for final installation of the Roadster Shop chassis. All the rust repair is done, everything is seam sealed and primed. I'm really happy with how this thing came out. As I'm going underneath the car here, I'm envisioning this car rolling across the auction block at Barrett-Jackson with the undercarriage camera. And well, they gotta look nice underneath, and this car does. When you consider how this car came to me, I am really happy with how this one turned out. Now, let's get that chassis installed. Okay, so you can see here, there's a little bit of clearancing that needs to be done on the shock mounts. These are the bolt-in strut mounts which attach to the Roadster Shop chassis. That is like the mid-mount. They also have a bracket which attaches to the stock front leaf spring area, and a body mount which attaches to the chassis itself, and then a forward body mount as well that goes up into the floor. And I'll get my little mirror out here to show you guys that there are some nut plates that go in on the inside of the floor. These do install through the seat bolt hole. Okay, here is a close-up of the Roadster Shop front suspension. 11 1/4 inch bear brakes. It's a short, long arm design with a Fox RS SV non-adjustable coilover. That's their base level option. Does include quite a stout sway bar. And here you can see the clamshell. This is actually the front chassis mount. There are 4 grade 8 bolts on each side which clamp this clamshell upper control arm and shock mount onto the chassis over the existing chassis rail. There are 4 more on the other side. And then there are 2 big 1/2 inch bolts with a threaded collar that you drill holes through the existing frame member and pass those through and torque them in place. It's definitely a stout setup. There's the other side. Power rack and pinion steering, motor mounts. Okay, so moving rearward, here is a shot of that front body mount. And here is the rear mount that uses the front leaf spring location. These guys right here are a little harder to show on camera, but that is the turnbuckle type strut that I mentioned earlier, it uses the factory rear shock mount. Rear upper shock mount, I should say. There's another view. And the other side. And then last but certainly not least, the rear frame mount, which gets sandwiched between a factory style leaf spring bushing and this little tab on the frame. And there's the other side. All right, and here is one final pass through underneath the car with the Roadster Shop Spec chassis fully installed. The next time you see this car, it'll have a drive shaft, a TKO 600 transmission, and, well, something good under the hood, but you'll have to wait and see. I'd like to take this moment to thank you so much for watching this week. If you're into this project, there will definitely be more, and I've got big things planned for this car, the first of which is going to arrive here in the next few days. I hope you like what you've seen. I hope you're as excited about this project as I am. And please make sure you get subscribed to the channel so you don't miss anything coming forward. I'll be posting shorts and full-length content about this project as we go through these final stages. Because even though there's a long way to go, I'm not going to make any poems about that. There's a long way to go. All of the hard work has been done, and this is the part of the project where it's going to really start to come together. All new parts going on, some custom work, some fabrication, which is my favorite part. This thing is going to be a sweet ride. And you know, it was hard to have this kind of optimism about the project when it showed up and I saw how bad it was. But Lou stepped up in a big way and kind of let me run wild and fix it the right way. That's the most important thing, because you know, it's one thing for a big shop to turn away customers and say, I'm not going to fix this unless we do it X, Y, Z, and it's, you know, boom, 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 and it's $200,000 and whatever. I'm not that guy. I'm just a YouTuber with a lot of automotive experience, and I had a very strong feeling that the project needed to be done in a certain way, and I tried my best to convince Lou in the beginning that this is the way we got to go. But it takes a customer partner who's willing to step up and actually do it right, and he has the love for this car that it took to get there. So big props to Lou. And this is going to be a really sweet car when all is said and done. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.